So tonight I want to talk about interceding for the abolishment of slavery, prostitution, and human trafficking. I just want to share some statistics, some common misconceptions, things that we might not think about when we look at what the definition of, or what human trafficking looks like, and then talk about what true justice kind of looks like, the difference between human justice and Jesus justice, but also I want to spend some time interceding for the victims, for traffickers, for the agencies that are working hard to abolish it. So I want to start out with a few statistics. Every day, innocent people are beaten, raped, and abused as slaves. It's kind of funny, if there's one humanity or morality effort that believers and non-believers can generally get behind or agree on, it's the abolishment of human slavery and trafficking. I mean, it's been a hot topic, I would say, probably for the past 5 or 10 years. There are a lot of government agencies as well as Christian organizations that are combining efforts and working together. The agencies that are working against it are, speaking to congressmen and parliaments and getting legislation changed, and there's a lot of activity around this, and it's not just the church that's doing it. So there are a lot of things that we are diametrically opposed on, like abortion, pornography, homosexuality, gender issues, but anti-slavery, the initiative there seems to be someplace that we're all aligned. And so that's actually showing how change can be effective, even if it's not the church doing it. There are godly standards, there are godly initiatives, standards that he set forth, and even though people don't understand the full spiritual ramification, they are doing good things, they are doing good work, and making the world better. So there's power in unity, for sure. And so I've kind of found that interesting as I've looked at it over the years, about how this is something people can pretty much agree on, that it's not okay, and it needs to be stopped. So there are 40+ million slaves globally. That's more than ever before in human history. So we've actually seen an increase even after Civil War and the slavery issue here, even after centuries of servanthood and slavery and that kind of stuff being okay. This is more, 40+ million is more globally than it's ever been before. 81% of them are trapped in forced labor, 25% of them are children, and 75% of them are women and girls. So there are men and boys that are trafficked as well, but the percentage is really high with women and girls. Slavery is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Human trafficking generates about $150 billion a year. Slave owners prey on the poor and the weak. So like I said, 1 in 4 victims of modern slavery is a child. And Ohio specifically is ranked number 4 in the amount of cases of human trafficking reported per capita in a study done by the National Human Trafficking Hotline. So that is based on the population of Ohio, factored in how many cases have been reported. We're number 4 in the list of the 50 states, and Michigan is number 7. So our region, our area, surrounded by water, close to like an in-between big cities, New York, Chicago, that kind of stuff, kind of the heartland, for lack of a better term, of trafficking in and out, back and forth. So that's, those are the numbers. Like, millions of people are affected by this. Billions of dollars are being spent on this, and being profited. So I wanted to start there, but I wanted to talk a little bit about how we view or how we define human trafficking. So it's often viewed in kind of a narrow scope. We think about either forced labor or brothels. Like, that's kind of the extent of what we think about. But slaves are found in religious temples, brick kilns, fishing boats, tree cutting plantations, quarries, mines, on the internet, in clubs, on street corners, and in the bedrooms of quiet suburban homes. I mean, it goes straight from diamond mines to your, to somewhat your neighbor next door. So there's a much broader scope of where these people are and how these people are being used. Not all the stories begin like the movie Taken. Have any of you seen Liam Neeson's movie Taken, where his daughter travels and gets duped by a guy, so it's not always like that. It's not always international, like where you're leaving the safety of your own country, or it's a young girl who's silly, they have a crush on a guy and do something stupid. That's not, it's real, but it's not the only way that this kind of thing happens. When I was working in Michigan, we had safety, like we had to do safety shares during our huddles every day during our meetings, and that could be anything. Like when it was our week to do huddles, like we could choose whatever safety we wanted, from forklift operation to driving in the rain to whatever. And I like to do like themes for the whole week, and I did human trafficking once. And one of my friends whose daughters was working in a kind of an endangered youth kind of center said that she ran across a girl and worked with a girl who was just a teenage girl going to high school, living at home with her parents, but was being trafficked because they had pulled her aside, tracked her down, and scared her so badly that they would kill her family, that they would kill her siblings, that scared her so bad and messed with her head so badly that she was literally living at home but prostituting herself, going to meetings and that kind of stuff at age 16, but still living at home with her folks. So she wasn't snatched up in a van and disappeared forever. She didn't go anywhere, internationally. But here's a 16-year-old girl who's terrified, living in her own house, sleeping in her own bed, but going out and being pimped out by traffickers in her own town, or the closest city or whatever.
The parents were unaware?
The parents completely unaware. It's like one of those things where it's the same kind of concept. If someone is being abused by someone, they manipulate and they try to make it feel like the kid's fault, or they say your parents won't love you anymore, or these particular men had told them they would kill her family if she didn't cooperate. And so her being, helpless in that situation and that kind of stuff, she felt like she had no choice. There wasn't any way out of it. So she was afraid to speak up for a long time until she finally got help. So they do this. They force a lot of these girls, even without snatching them up. A girl can be forced through fear, manipulation, preying on low self-esteem, girls with low self-esteem and low self-worth, and they can be talked into doing something that they don't want to do, or they wouldn't normally ever do, because of their state of mind. They're desperate men and women in prostitution and pornography and strip clubs. It's really not just a matter of choice. So one particular area where we might disagree with the secular world on human trafficking is the tie of pornography to that industry. I mean, it's invariably, undoubtedly linked. So what you have are consumers, whether it's a live person or it's online or it's in a strip club or in a brothel or whatever. Pornography feeds into that. It degrades women. It portrays violence. If you think about what a video game can do to a kid's mind, it's the same type of thing. Your mind gets warped, and it absolutely plays into the human trafficking thing, because people are being trafficked into prostitution and that kind of stuff because people are paying for this. So it's not, they don't do it. It's an industry. So they don't do it just to be mean or horrible or whatever. They do it because it's actually a commodity. People will pay for it, and it's a way to make money. So there is a definite link between prostitution and pornography and human trafficking. So the men and women that are desperate for money, that are desperate for someone to take care of them, that are all of these things. It's not just a choice, like, oh well, she's choosing to be on the street corner, she's choosing. That's not true. It's not cut and dry. You might find 1% of girls that are in that kind of industry, even if they're making money, that really want to be there, and it's really what they would have chosen for their life. there is also the international side of it, girls, young girls and women and people indentured, men even trying to get to the US, trying to get to a better life. They get sucked into, being indentured servants, which turns out to them stealing their passport, which turns into slavery. There are countries that, like in Southeast Asia, especially, which we're going to be especially because we're going to be talking about it. Like there are parents selling their kids into prostitution and slavery, and it's so culturally accepted that the little girls grow up knowing that that's their future, that they're going to have to help the family in this way and earn in this way. And then a lot of people don't realize that there's a rise in trafficking at big sporting events, Super Bowl, World Cup, that kind of stuff. I know personally teams that have gone to these events to intercede and pray and keep their eyes open and try to fight human trafficking during these events. But it picks up because people are out of town and they're living it up, and they're staying in hotels and anything goes. So there are actually people that are being trafficked during these events because of the large crowds.
I think the Arnold Classic is a big one.
Yeah, the Arnold Classic, for sure. And then also during crisis weather events, I have friends that have worked in Thailand and Sri Lanka and Cambodia after the tsunami, because kids get orphaned and they get snatched up. And there are people that actually just go, they just go, they're trained, whether they're a trafficker or a pedophile or whatever, they go into those situations on purpose for that, because there are kids without parents, kids that are lost and that sort of thing. So
they say, we'll take you in.
Yeah, so they snatch them up.
We'll care for you. Yeah.
Yeah, so they snatch them up during that because there's nobody really that can stop them. And then we talked about, the connection between human trafficking and sexual immorality in the pornography industry. So those are just some misconceptions and things that people might not think about, like how close to home it could really be, how big of an industry it really is, and some of those ties to pornography and strip clubs and all that kind of stuff. I think we can all agree as believers that Jesus is the only answer. There is a definite difference between human justice and God's justice. They're two different philosophies. And so I listed some verses about freedom. I mean, we all know the verse, whom the sun sets free is free indeed. But in the Psalms, it talks about how he delivers us. Psalm 146 talks about the man who follows God's statutes, but it's God who sets him free. So there's biblical the standard there where, yes, we can feed the sick and take care, feed the hungry, take care of the sick, do the physical things that need to be done, meet the physical needs that need to be done, but that's not the only answer. We hear all the time when aid is sent to countries that are torn by war or disaster, dropping a pallet of water, in an open field is not helping. That pallet is going to be taken by the black, by the black market and sold, or it's going to be kept by the leader of that country or that sort of thing. So those efforts aren't in vain, but they're not the only thing. They're not the full resolution. They're not the full transformation that needs to take place. That's only part of it. So we can fight to change laws and raise awareness, and those things are good. We've actually seen the numbers drop. And so I saw a chart this week where 2017 was like the height of human trafficking, and in the last 2 years it started to decline again. And I think a lot of that is from raising awareness and making it a lot harder, the laws changing around the world, but people also being trained to recognize symptoms and that kind of stuff. I think that part of that is from awareness. But abolishing slavery and corruption requires a heart transformation, and only Jesus can do that. There was a story of a boy who was adopted out of like a Eastern European. His name was Igor, and he was adopted out of an Eastern European orphanage, and he had a really hard time of it. It wasn't a great orphanage. He didn't, I mean, like his story, his home story was heartbreaking. This amazing couple, this amazing Christian couple adopts him, brings him home, gives him everything he could ever want and need, you know, sets up his room, buys him all the things he wants, feeds him all these amazing meals, you know, there's warm cookies on the counter for him when he comes home from school, you know, like they're doing everything they can to meet every need that he has. And one night they heard commotion in the kitchen, and the dog was like barking and yelping like he was in pain. And they went in, and this child, I think they said he was around 7 or 8 at the time, was like wrestling the dog on the floor, trying to get his dog food away from him. And that just, it breaks your heart, but it makes you realize that meeting all the physical needs and changing the circumstances around someone doesn't fix the issue, you know, the heart issue. It doesn't make the transformation take place, where he felt like he still had an orphan spirit. He still felt like he had to fight for what he needed and fight for sustenance. I mean, he had cookies on the counter, and he's fighting over dog food with the dog. And so it gives you a picture of what he went through in the orphanage, I'm sure, but also is a good analogy to what true brokenness can do to a person, and that it takes more than just a pretty house and cookies on the counter to make that right. And a person that has been sold into slavery, whether they have been just stolen away and forced into it, or whether they have been manipulated and talked into thinking that that's all that they deserve, or that's all that they don't deserve any better, that's all they're worth. It takes, to truly abolish slavery and to truly change lives, it takes more than just meeting physical needs and changing laws and that sort of thing. All those things are good, but we need to be interceding for the hearts of the victims. We need to be interceding for the hearts of the traffickers, and we need to be interceding for the hearts of the consumers. Because until the traffickers come to salvation, until the consumers are delivered from their porn addiction or from whatever, until they truly meet Jesus, it's always going to be an issue. It's always going to be a problem. We can, you know, hold back the flood. We can stick our finger in the dike a little bit. We can make some changes, but it really is with all with all world issues, with all sin issues. Jesus is he's the only answer to bringing true peace of mind and bringing true transformation. So when we pray tonight, there are a few things that I'd like for us to touch on. But first and foremost, intercession is key. Like, that's the most important thing that we can do. There are a lot of great, there are a lot of laborers, there are a lot of great organizations out there and that kind of stuff that are doing the work and that are, working hard and working with people and that kind of stuff. But intercession has to be the foundation. And especially the two sides of that, if we can't go, if we don't feel called to go and do it, just like with missions and everything else, we need to support the people that are doing it, in prayer. And we need to support what God is doing in the earth and that kind of stuff through prayer. But also the people that are actually doing it, if they're called into doing it, they need to be prayed up as well. So intercession is key. It's foundational. It needs to be a part of any ministry. It needs to be part of any believer's life. So that's where we go first, because that's where we're going to see the most transformation. We're praying for God's will to be done. We're praying for him to make the wrong things right. And then we're coming alongside of him, doing the best we can to help meet needs as well. So there are 7 things I wanted to touch on under intercession. Pray for Jesus to make the wrong things right, that slavery of all kinds would be abolished. That's first and foremost. But also to pray for the hearts of men and women, for salvation to come to the victims, because that's going to help them get through it. For salvation to come through the traffickers, because that's going to slow it down. And ultimately for the consumers as well, that they would know their true worth and identity in Jesus Christ. It's that transformation that will pull them out of that lifestyle. We would pray for the rescue and comfort of the victims in their distress, remembering those children and men and women that are in total despair, literally in chains. and have compassion, ask the Lord for compassion for his emotions, for the people that are going through it. We need to pray for the anti-human trafficking initiatives for the different groups, and I list some of them there that I'm familiar with. The International Justice Mission is one of my favorites. My brother and sister have been associated with them some, done some work in Sri Lanka and that kind of stuff through them and through the Salvation Army. But they literally have detectives, lawyers, lobbyists, social workers, all of these professional people that are literally going in and saving people, literally going to parliaments, to like Exodus Cry does as well, going into governments and helping laws be changed. Exodus Cry created the movie series, the Nefarious movie series, and they are actually showing this to congresses and parliaments around the world that are considering making prostitution legal. So in England and that kind of stuff, they're going and they're actually showing them what it really is and what prostitution can lead to and that kind of stuff. So so these groups are great. We have one here in Fairlawn, Ohio, called Rahab, and it is actually a safe house for women that are coming out of prostitution and slavery. There's a similar place, Wellspring, which my sister-in-law has worked for in Georgia, where they bring women, they give them a place to stay, but they also train them. And they're connected also with the House of Prayer in Atlanta. So they, spend their study time and that kind of stuff at the House of Prayer, and then they have a place to stay as they're coming out of prostitution or whatever their background is. We need to pray for the world governments and their legislation. Like I mentioned, the countries that are looking at legalizing, prostitution and that kind of stuff, that they will make better choices. We need to pray for the laborers in the field and to go to the field, people that will go and help. And pray for our intercessors to rise up and take their place on the wall and pray. And that's us. That's the people that the Lord trusts his burden with, trusts his emotions with, that will take it, that will make it regularly a part of our lives to pray for the whole situation.
With Mickey